The reason why countries such as Swaziland are highly unequal in terms of incomes and wealth is because of unequal power relations. We are living in a country that is a dictatorship, therefore. It makes sense that one of the first institutions to be attacked and killed is the university. So what we are seeing in this country is a failure of government.
Yeah.
That issue is linked to some extent to what I would have called the lot of royally linked vanity projects that were being supported by the government. We are having so few of our young people transitioning from primary school, where there is free primary education, to secondary, and then even much, much fewer towards tertiary education. I think Swaziland was never a viable state. From the time when independence was being discussed, it was always clear that this country was not viable as an independent state. Same way that you see now with our small spaza shop political parties who are always on each other's throats on the social media. You see, now imagine people need to mature politically to the level where they demand and take self-government.
Kunjani ngangeni siyanibukela ehlelweni lesiya esilinde njalo ngomsondo kabridge.com ebambini incumbi basijwayela indemeni nama weekend publications, but we've ventured into podcasts and into radio. Mhlawumbe singakaqali nje ukuqala ukuthi singathi sesivusele abantu sibasho ukuthi ngubani umlangeni uqhamukaphi nokuthi ke la uzofika lana nje na uqhamukaphi ngoba ngathi usuka kule 13 zawo sesikhwahlane.
Asinivusele abalaleli bakade bridge libito lami Thembinkosi Dlamini ngisebenza kule nhlangano yaCANGO coordinating assembly of NGOs embabane before ngibeCANGO ngathi ngisebenze Oxfam South Africa eJohannesburg. Mina ke kaOxfam bengathi ngingena hamba embili kakhulu kubuka ukuthi sikhutsate bohulumeni emhlaba wonke njengoba nathi ukuthi siOxfam sisebenza in over 100 countries in the world. Ukuthi basibuke lesivumelwano nekuthi basi-implement bathathe inqumo letithithe lesibona ukuthi ngintona titawusita umhlaba ukuthi ubhekane nalesimo.
Umfuka ngasiva sikhuluma ngeOxfam but vele uqalela ekhaya khona le kaCANGO if I recall in the past bo wendani kaCANGO before yeka Oxfam lokuphinza ubuya nyalo.
Kushothi kaCANGO ngaqala kusebenza khona ngeminyaka wa 2006 nangikhumbula kahle bebangicashe khona as an economist beqala ke ukuthi kaCANGO kube ne-economist ngaleyo minyaka bengathi ngito establish lihlelo la khona le economic justice ngalothi bese kubukakala ukuthi at the end of the day naloku uhulumende akhona anato tinhlelo te ku improve ama livelihoods even bekutholakala ukuthi kuleti inhlelo te economy nekuphathwa kwetibali ta uhulumende public finance boy ukhanze ukuthi uhulumende uyatendela nje without input yalama citizens nalabantu labangibona ababhadala umthelo labenda ukuthi uhulumende abekhona akhona ukuthi atodobe. So umsebenzi wami ke mina bekungukuthi ngifake lo muvo ukuthi ama ordinary citizens nawo abe ne say endleleni lokuphathwa ngayo umnotho welive kwabiwa kwawo nekuthi inhlelo tahulumende tiphakelwa kanjani imali ema budget allocations nekuthi lawo ma allocations asebenziseke kanjani. Siyati ke ukuthi bantu nangabe shothi basebenzisa imali tahulumende ngalesinye isikhathi uyukhanze ukuthi bese basebenzisa le imali ngazuthi imali tabo ngazuthi set imali taKaNxumalo kanti phela leti imali tesive leti ufuna ukuthi nawo tisebenzisa ukhumbule ukuthi imali tesive kunendlela lo tisebenzisa ngayo ungabese ukhanza ukuthi soyantshontsha lokunye sekungena ekhikhini sekwakho ufuna na usebenzisa imali tesive ube accountable si achieve nakulesithi value for money ungendeki nje ukhanze ukuthi uthunywa ukuthi hamba uthenga ipenseli bengayithenga mina ipenseli ngelishumi kodwa naso yithenga nga10 emalangeni ngalothi lona inemalangeni songena ekhikhini lakho siyakubona ke kakhulu nyalo njengoba sisukele lo mgudugudu nje wama drugs ngazo sibese kwendeka kakhulu lokho ukuthi imali tawulmente etinyamala letingene emapocket enabantu
but ngoba benisebenza ngetinhlangano ngekho ngaphansi kwaHulumende beni khona ngakanani kuba impactful kuletinto leto ngoba ngicabanga ukuthi timvo leti kuHulumende leto beni exerta some pressure doing litigation bophethe inkantolo noma beni influence policy benisebenza kanjani
kusho nje nasayicala le program ngalesikhathi lesayicala ngayo kubo 2006 we used to have ama ministers bekakatha progressive ngaleso sikhathi bo babe majozi sithole bomfundisi Absalom Dlamini lebekatha se economic planning bebakathe baseseka kakhulu kuletinhlelo nasicala njengokuthi nje bebakathe bawa encourage ama officials as a Minister of Finance ukuthi attend ama workshops nasende ma workshops sifundisa ngebudget phinze futhi nangabe shothi senda ibudget analysis bazivumele ukuthi basinikete onke lama documents lekufanele sibe nawo including the Auditor General's report basinikete the expenditure book lengiyona ingiloluhlaka ukuthi imali tawulmente ethanjiswa kanjani nawo onke nje ama documents lahambelana ne development planning yelive ne Central Bank nayo besinikete ngoma documents leswathingako ne information ne Central Statistics Office nayo besinikete lama documents lawo sikhone ke ukuthi siwa kwaningi sende ianalysis yethu bese siyakhona ukuthi si present nangabe shothi bese present abokhanza ukuthi siyabambisana ne Central Bank ne Minister of Finance babe khona balalele baphendvule kulokunye ukuthi okay lokhu ngeba kukhona enyalo maybe bangakubuka eminyakeni lelandzelako kanjalo so bekuba kungukuthi nje nasendathina letinhlelo tethu te advocacy bese uhulumende yena asisite ngekuthi abe ngumuntu lo mukelako le information lesimniketa yona ukuthi ayisebenzise ku improve lama budget outcomes
sitawubuya ke kakhulu kuleti mnotho nabo economy but how easy was the transition from dealing with issues of the economy to issues of climate change and climate justice ngoba ngicabanga ukuthi related noma umva ngathi buwathi economics and climate they appear two worlds apart but tihlangene how easy was the transition in your roles kule misebenzi lemibili
I think the transition was fairly easy ikakhulu ngalothi lama organizations lengwasebenzelako kakhulu kuma NGOs focus kakhulu ku capacity building before nje kuthiwe ngiyocamba I project on climate justice kukhona ama workshops lenge ngawahamba nalabanye boza kwethu lababuya kulamanye mave labangemahlahlandlela kulomsebenzi lona so other than lama workshops ngalokuthi at the end of the day tonke letinhlelo tibuke umuntu ukuthi umuntu uthuthukiswa kanjani improving my living standards of the citizens of the world including my citizens aseSwatini ukhanza ukuthi kuyathelelana because nasikhuluma ngale climate justice nje ne climate change involete abamcuka kakhulu ngiloku ushintsha kwalama policies ukuthi lama policies abe responsive kuze khona stoba nale climate adaptation ne mitigation letinhlelo leti tonke tihambelana nema allocations ema resources to make sure for instance ukuthi when we are talking about agriculture lamuhla and food security asisikhulumi nje kuphela ngeagriculture but we are talking about climate smart agriculture agriculture lesibona ukuthi okay kunekushintsha kwesimo selitulu therefore sekufuneka ukuthi silime kuma tunnels kube ne shelters control temperatures control exposure to langa control umoya nako konke lokho lokufuna ukuthi control so that istokhulisa lomkhicito lokhona lapha
yeah ngifuna kubuya I was reading CNN report actually I was shocked today ukuthi Dubai has bought the size of UK in several countries where they are doing carbon offshoots kulawo manang yini le
Offsets.
sorry, lama carbon offsets, and it's already bringing a lot of issues around land in Africa, around new forms of colonialism, but also they are even questioning COP scientists and all of that. Is it even working in lokuthi you continue to produce, you continue to burn fossil fuels, and you hope ukuthi ngalokuthi unetimali you will just buy and offset it by buying land in Africa, greenwashing and all of that?
Yes, I think you are very correct. The right word lesiyisebenzisako greenwashing. Just to highlight lokuthi some of the solutions that are being put on the table, lesibona thina ngazuthi akasebenzi in practice in terms of kuzama reduce lama emissions. Ukuze sikhone ukuthi si reduce emissions kufuneka governments commit ukuthi they will take the necessary steps to change the way that production leyendeka ngayo, to curb emissions, to curb excessive consumption, so that we force the curve down in terms of the climate change. So lesikubonako ke ngilokuthi lamavela ngona are responsible for climate change, the biggest polluters. They are trying to avoid irresponsibility by simply making sure that they go to poorer countries, buying vegetation and land areas in those countries, and then they are able to say, well, we can continue to pollute because we are offsetting our pollution with some carbon sinks in the poorer countries. We do not think that is the solution.
But there's a lot of debate around the issue of, for example, should we stop using coal in Africa? Because that's the word in the world. In first world countries, let's go to renewable energy, coal. But the argument is that the industrialization in Europe is based on coal, and coal is cheap. And in Africa, we do not emit kangako as compared to highly industrialized, highly energy consumption nations. How do we maneuver the very sensitive topic around renewable energy, around coal, around job losses as well that come with such structural changes?
Well, I think the right word that we are using is structural changes. By structural change, we simply mean that as we move from fossil fuel-based economies to renewable energy-based economies, we are going to change the way that we are doing things. In fact, our researchers are showing us that there is going to be more jobs as a result of the changing to renewable energies than we were having when we were still on carbon-dependent development. So it's a matter of making the commitments and making the necessary investments to ensure that we transition. That is why sikhuluma just energy transition. Sikhuluma just energy transition, we are simply saying for the transition to be just, it must take into account the needs of developing countries. It must take into account the question of jobs. It must take into account the question of ensuring that such a transition does not only benefit rich people, but it benefits the populations generally. Yeah. So, not to benefit the rich countries, but benefit even poorer countries. So, what others are arguing by saying, well, let's allow developing countries to continue to pollute so that they can catch up. This is not how we need to approach this thing. We need to approach it as a collective, as the entirety of the United Nations, so that when we go into it, we go together, we know that we reduce emissions overall across all countries, not just in the most polluting countries.
But before Suwenjilana, I want to check Ngosi, how are we doing as Africa and Southern Africa? And maybe we can even zoom down to Swaziland in the issues of transitions, renewable energy, and all of that. And also, even the energy itself, we're not really penetrated as much, especially in rural areas and all of that. How are we doing compared to the rest of the world, Asia, Latin America? As Africans, how are we doing?
Yeah, I don't think we are doing well, except that we are at the advantage where we can leapfrog in terms of we are not expected to invest that much in research and development in the early stages of ideation and bringing forward the innovative solutions to confront climate change and put in place renewable energies.
Yeah.
So today we just off-take innovations that have already been done by the other countries.
More or less, because we don't have to start from scratch. Basically.
Yes, precisely.
We can just take on what already the world is.
So
and also to learn also from their mistakes, where they've got tinzao that are just left open because they mined and just left things like that.
Yes, precisely. So if you imagine some years back when solar energy was starting out, it was very expensive.
Yeah.
But over the years, solar energy is becoming cheaper and cheaper as the mining of strategic minerals that are used in putting solar components together has improved in terms of the volumes.
Yeah.
And also as people have innovated, have built firms to be able to produce in massive quantities the solar components that are required. It means the price per unit is going down. So for us as African countries, we just buy off shelf those technologies and then we just deploy them. You know, but it was difficult for countries like Germany, Netherlands, who started with these innovations many years back, trying them out, failing. Some of the technology that they were using then is now obsolete. They made the investment. They have to leave it and start something new because the world is moving.
Yeah, that's true. As Ngosi, you decide to then eventually come back home. Why did you feel the need to come back to Swaziland? I'm imagining Osfam is a huge organization, and I'm sure you're interacting at a global level, even though you are in Africa. Why did you feel you need to come back to where you started in CANGO? Was there anything specific that you wanted to achieve that you left when you were here? You were in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is when I left to go to South Africa in 2009, the intention was not to migrate forever. The intention was always to come back at some point to be able to pay it forward, to pay back to eMaSwati, because eMaSwati are the people who took me to school. They invested in me. So it made sense that at some point I make a contribution to the development of this country in particular. It is not like when I was with Oxfam, I was not making those kind of investments, because as a global entity, the changes that we were making in the global stage, influencing at the UN, G20, and other multilateral institutions, had the impact also on eSwatini. But I really did feel that at this particular moment, especially when the country was going through upheavals, it was important that some of us come back and get our hands dirty in terms of trying to move the country towards a safer space, you know.
No, you've just taken us to a very smooth transitions there. It's been a difficult 3 years in the country. A lot of promises and a lot of things like Tendegile. But I want to start just on COVID. The devastation of COVID to small businesses, to big business, to migration also, ngoba most of our people benda kuphila kwabo ngokuhamba bayethengisa esikhwahlande bacuphe esikhwahlande babuye ekhaya. You know, how devastating was
COVID to the social economy of our country, leading to lama behaviors lesikhulume ngawo, or it was just something lefika sparka involve bese ivele so loku I build up over the years?
I think the economy was not performing well prior to COVID.
Yeah.
Already we were going through phases where we're almost tethering on the line of recession.
Yeah.
In the country. I think you will recall that our mainstay economy, which is South Africa, prior to COVID, was a number of times said to be attracting negative ratings from rating agencies, etc., etc. So when COVID came, it came at a time when the economy in the region was not in a good state of health. Already the people were suffering.
Yeah.
The economy was not performing well, we were shedding jobs. And then when COVID came, the impact of these successive lockdowns and travel restrictions impacted the majority of the ordinary people who live off going to the firms to supply labor and earn something. But with that lack of movement, it means a lot of the downstream industries were also affected. Yeah. The waste pickers, for instance, the people who sell their wares, the people who sell food items to the people who go to work in the firms in Matsapa, the people who sell second-hand clothing. The global supply chains were also decimated, which means a lot of the imports from overseas were not coming into our shores. And therefore, the devastation was worse. Unfortunately, the nature of these things is that it is a slow onset kind of disaster. It is not easy for you to see it coming.
You see it accumulatively
over a period of time. Then you start realizing that, hell no, even the little savings that were in people's pockets and banks were now depleted. People had sold most of their assets. They were starting to sell their productive assets. So that is the situation. I don't think we are at the point where the majority of people are now recovered from the impact of COVID.
But look, if you look at Swaziland, this has been a shock to me, is that we feel the pain of poverty, of the economy, but the GDP of the country has been performing far better than most of the countries in Southern Africa and even, no, not in Southern Africa, in the region, in the continent. Maybe, I think I read the IMF report, if I'm not mistaken, is it the last one? It does indicate that it slowed down, but in the last 15, maybe 20 years, we have been steadily growing, but not at the regional pace, but it's been growing a bit. Lama industries for you as economists, which you feel that have been abandoned, that could do more to grow economy, maybe not abandoned per se, but which we think we must be supporting, or they must be putting a lot of resources so that we can then
Yeah, I think the question as eSwatini is a small economy. So when you had an external shock such as COVID, it was hitting on a small economy. It's easy for that economy to quickly respond.
Yeah.
Even the rebound is as quick as that, because even small changes will quickly show that the economy is now on a rebound, because we are having the impact of a small base.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to pull a big economy such as South Africa out of a recession.
Yes.
But with a small economy, you find that just two of our industries, for instance, the sugar cane and the logging, the forests, are performing better at that point in time, and then they pull with them the economic indicators.
Yeah.
So because there's a difference between the economic indicators and the overall changes, because the changes, we should see it in people's lives and how people are able to cope. The poverty levels need to go down. So eSwatini is one of those countries with high levels of inequality. So which means if the 5 people who are the top earners in the country with significant wealth, their incomes are increasing, it will show in terms of our economic indicators.
But does not translate.
It does not translate to changes on the majority of the people.
In fact, you remind me of a Zapiro cartoon when during Thabo Mbeki's reign in South Africa. There was a very nice cartoon he did. Where the duck had laid the golden egg, but still, I can't remember what was the story, but the story was that it's not so like kobos, but they lay the egg, but so like.
But it's not showing any.
Yeah.
Yes, that's where we are sitting. Where the majority of the people are not seeing the changes
because the wealth is in the few.
The wealth is in the hands of the few.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when the wealth is in the hands of a few, it can hardly impact the ordinary people. And they can only eat so much themselves. So they just continue accumulating their wealth because they cannot just consume all their wealth.
Piketty, you should know Piketty, a French economist, who's very big on the issues of inequality. And he's written extensively. I think I saw his recent book. I've not read it, but I've just read some few reports, reviews. He's really big on saying the world, even at a global stage, is getting more and more unequal. But it's even more shocking for a small economy, for a small population like Swaziland, to see this massive gap of income inequality. To redistribute the wealth? Or maybe, let me put it like this, how do we build the wealth in a redistributive fashion? Because it's one thing to just want to create wealth, ibe concentrated, but it's also another to build a redistributive economy. How do we deal with the issues of inequality?
Well, the reason why countries such as Swaziland are highly unequal in terms of incomes and wealth is because of unequal power relations.
Okay.
So when you have unequal power, you are going to have unequal wealth and incomes.
Yeah.
So until you change the political structure, the distribution of power in the country, then you are unlikely going to start to change and have a redistributive economy. This is simply because if the few have the power, they use their power, the political power, to influence the policy levers in their favor.
Yeah.
If the few control the power, for instance, they are more likely going to access the money that is sitting in the banks, in the pension funds, in your lidlelandongeni, to be able to buy assets for themselves. So it's not like those people are working harder. They just use the political power to give them access to productive resources.
Yeah.
And then they use that as leverage to be able to accumulate more and more wealth.
Yeah.
Until we change the power dynamics, we are unlikely going to impact the income inequality in the country.
I mean, which is very interesting because you are saying you cannot divorce the economy, issues of inequality, redistribution, with the overall generally politics of our country and how power is distributed. And this to a few people. And in this case, basically, it's the king and Hulumende and a few other emerging, I don't even want to say foreign power, capital powers, but in locally as well, who are exerting a lot of financial and economic power, buying off almost everything you can think of. Now, if what you're saying therefore is true, it means how then do we ensure we deal with the power dynamics? Upheavals, by the way, we can have all sorts of theories around how to get there. But how, in your view, do we deal with the issues of unequal power distribution by extension, how we restructure the political system to ensure ukuthi the ordinary person has power?
Well, I think in the main, the people of the country need to decide where they want to take the country in terms of the politics.
Yeah.
Once the people have decided, they need to take it upon themselves to liberate themselves in one way or the other. I think we have had a lot of political discussions with political players talking about how the country needs to democratize. In the debates, however, what was missing is simple issues around the question of the land.
Yes.
Why the land, as one of the critical resources, is still controlled by one family.
Yes.
And then they are able to take the land anytime they want, including any investments that could have gone into the land.
But also, just on that as well, also how land has locked our economic potential, even if Mabombe ignore the other political issues tied to it. But the fact, they've controlled land, is controlled by the chiefs, and there's a lot of land that is unproductive and undeveloped because we've not liberated the land to benefit ordinary people.
Yeah, so unless we have that land reform agenda as a priority in the broader democratization agenda, then we're unlikely going to liberate this country.
Yeah.
We need to talk about the jobs situation, especially youth unemployment.
Yeah.
It is the responsibility of the government of the day to be able to assist with promoting job creation.
Yeah.
They need to intervene in the economy in ways that creates jobs. They cannot just let
powers of
the forces, the market
invisible
forces, to be the only ones that are deciding what is happening in the economy. They need to be playing a more incremental role.
Yes.
If they are not doing that, then we are unlikely going to have the right skills in the country. We are unlikely going to be having the young people of this country investing in the critical growth sectors of the economy. Because if you look at the economy overall, it's not like all sectors of the economy are growing. There are new growth areas of the economy where we need to understand those headwinds, and then we're able to invest in those sectors as a country so that our young people can enter the market, the job markets via those sectors.
But how do you do that when our university is like this? Because the university will be the center of research, center of innovation, and the intellectual giant to show us new paths. With a university like this,
I think the question of the power dynamics is coming to play. It was clear many years back that the university was not just the leader in terms of research and innovation and producing the skills of this country. This is where most people would go to start to get alternative views about how this country can be governed, as an example. So if we are living in a country that is a dictatorship, therefore, it makes sense that one of the first institutions to be attacked and killed is the university, because the idea was to kill the soul of the university and the people that it produces.
Yeah.
If the people who are at the university, they do not enjoy academic freedom, they cannot come back with the groundbreaking research that is required and the thinking about where the country should be going, then it is unlikely going to produce the skills that are relevant for this time.
But because it's shocking that the university produces more graduates who are teachers, lawyers, nurses. I can't think of anything else. Ngwane College, Ngwane William Picture, school, and they end up being teachers. And there's something in South Africa that I liked, that Minister of Education, Plain Zimanza, did. He took a lot of government money and invested in the TVET colleges because he understood that the economy is now going to we've let Voctim down, we've let Boscott, there's not been anything else. Even Limco Queen should be able to produce those kinds of skill sets like a in the economy, but it's not prioritized and given all of that money that's necessary so that it can produce the kind of graduates needed in this type of economy.
Yeah, I think we are living in a global village.
Yeah.
So it only makes sense that our tertiary education sector transforms over time.
Yeah.
So what we are having now is the post-independence thinking, where the tertiary education sector was simply put in place to produce enough skills to get the government going.
Yeah.
So what then is required now is a new thinking to say, how can we produce a new caliber of graduates in eSwatini that are good to serve in the global economy?
Yeah.
People who have more skills, more information, they are able to interact at different levels.
Yeah.
For instance, if you're looking at the question of the Africa Free Trade Agreement,
Yeah.
That's market access. So you need to produce more people who are oriented towards how can we access the international markets so that we create value in country for export purposes, and then in that way we earn foreign exchange for the country and money for ourselves to be able to better ourselves. So that is where the new government needs to be thinking hard around what are the skills that are required by this economy today and into the future, and then how can we reorient our tertiary institutions. Otherwise, what we are talking about is something that we have said in the past. We have an inverted pyramid, where you find that we have a high concentration of skills in the tertiary education sector, which is more the professional lines of work, your accountants, lawyers, teachers, and the like. But we do not have your technical and vocational skills, which in a proper pyramid setup, they should be the bigger numbers. Which means even when we talk about the investments in post-school education, the investments should be going more to TVET as compared to your UNESWA at the top, because that should be producing just the few professionals that are required by the economy, but the masses of the people should be in TVET so that they are able to produce, because this economy needs more production.
Yeah, because you see, look at today, we've got cell phones, we've got computers, we've got many things that have come with technology, but who is servicing? Swazis cannot even fix a radio. I mean, in the majority of cases at least. Most of it is foreigners, mainly Pakistan, Indians, Bangladesh, which,
and Mozambicans.
Mozambique, which is an indictment to our education system.
Yes.
Because that's where the technology is going.
Yes.
And it's not going to AI even. You look at other children, they are being taught at primary school robotics, programming, you name it.
Yeah. So we are still talking about the hardcore technical skills, when in effect we should be talking about 4IR and artificial intelligence.
Yeah, so the other thing that I wanted to talk about is, and it's been my personal interest, two things, is how Swazis have surrendered their economy to foreigners. And I'm not wanting to get into the xenophobic area. You look, I stay around Fairview, Manzini, Police, Telwin, you name it. There are more beer halls and churches run and owned by Swazis than they are owned and run by than there are Swazis. There are more foreigners than there are Swazis. And to me, it's a recipe for disaster, because even if the politics changes, if you do not own the economy, you are literally still a slave.
Yeah. So in any country set up, we need to have government. The role of government is to intervene and regulate and make laws, enforce the laws and all of those things.
Yeah.
So it is unclear to me why these foreigners can easily just land at Sikupe Airport and then come here and establish their own churches. They are supposed to be going via your work permit, citizenship offices in Babane, and really are able to apply to say, I'm coming to your country, I'm coming to invest. They need to be asking them certain questions about the nature of the investments or activity that they are going to do.
Because you can't invest in a spas if you're a foreigner. You have got to, if you are going to invest, it must be something significant.
Precisely. So what we are seeing in this country is a failure of government to be able to regulate what the foreigners are doing in this country. Is something that our own Maswati will not do in their countries, for instance.
But isn't that not xenophobic? Because we have got to be able to transcend that line very carefully. Because on the one hand, you don't want to play into the politics of anti-foreigner rhetoric. Yet at the same time, I do think there are laws around. I mean, it's not even laws. I think it's about how do you incentivize, how do you ensure that Maswati run the real economy. You look at where Maswati, ordinary Swazis that is, they are now left Pasini, that's the locally owned economy now, and and then retail things are Chwala and a few retail, supermarkets and everything is foreigners. Land also, the big white foreigners, even Europeans, they own the big chunks of land here with, of course, in collaboration with the rulers of the country. So you can see the foreigners are really ayangena kancane kancane, and it's a recipe for future xenophobic outbursts that's happening in South Africa.
I think xenophobia really is a phenomenon whereby people are simply targeted on account of them being foreigners. What we are talking about is a totally different story.
Yeah.
From the point of view that the laws of the country are disregarded by these foreigners. So if you go
these foreigners or the government,
if you go to any country in the world, I'm sure you've been to many countries, you've applied for visas for those countries, you stick to the laws of that country.
Yeah.
When they say you are coming here for educational purposes, you are not going to be found then working some hours on the side, unless you go back and you say, I'm now applying for
work visa
on top of my student visa. So that's how it works. So in this country, the laws are there, but the people who are in charge of the laws, they are not enforcing the laws in accordance with what the statutes were created for. So that is why we are having a situation where the foreigners have found a way of maneuvering in such a way that they are able to access opportunities that should ordinarily be reserved for a Maswati.
That's true. Coming back to the issue of the economy, I think that's where nisebenda ngakhona kakhulu. There's been views, I mean, the pillar of our economy is sakhula nje thina okuthiwa sugar, Swazi gold. How sustainable is this massive investment we have on sugar? Because I've heard someone who works in the sugar industry saying it's not sustainable. Even I think Europeans, they've changed around le ndlela besithenga ngayo bebasithengela ngayo. There's now a lot of competition on beet sugar from Brazil and other countries, and also the pressures they face in Europe of their own markets. How can we maneuver that space?
Well, I think the history is that we, as Eswatini, were beneficiaries to the Cotonou Agreement.
Yes.
The Cotonou Agreement was such that it was giving us preferential access
Yes.
to EU markets for our sugar.
Yes.
What these preferential markets came with was a preferential price as well. So which means that there was we were not selling our sugar at the open market price.
Yes.
We were selling our sugar to EU at a premium.
Yes.
So when the EU came back and we started negotiating the economic partnership agreements at the turn of the century, they made it clear that those preferential markets are going to disappear.
Yeah.
Which means we're now going to be selling our sugar at a competitive world market price. However, because our sugar was protected by this preferential tariff for many, many years,
Yeah.
it meant that we had accumulated inefficiencies in our production system over years.
Because we were not competing.
Yeah,
at that
because
level.
we were not competing at that level. So the EU assisted us in as far as improving our efficiencies, but at the same time assisted us with the transition. For instance,
Diversifying the economy, that is.
diversifying the economy, putting a little bit of road infrastructure to make the transportation easier and seamless, and also increasing the number of hectares under sugarcane production.
Yeah.
Because it was always understood that the more you produce the sugar, the more you are going to achieve economies of scale. However, I do not think we have reached a stage where we are now globally competitive in terms of our production system.
Yeah.
But we are able to sell to the world market and we are able to break even.
Yeah.
So I think that is where we are sitting with our sugar cane. At the current moment, we are not selling the bulk of our sugar to preferential markets. We are now selling at the world market price.
But where kukhona inkinga etibonako lapho wena?
Well, the challenges will always be there as more people see opportunity in sugarcane production and processing, especially if countries like Brazil, Chile, and other Southern American countries who have more favorable climatological conditions and are able to produce cheaper.
Yeah.
They are going to give us a run for our money in the market.
Yeah. But you talk a bit about the diversification of our economy. It seems kunama sectors of the economy that are not performing at maximum, or they should be. We're too much reliant on agriculture, which is good, but I'm worried, for example, on issues of energy. We could see, if you look at South Africa, for example, it's already saying it's gonna switch off the lights in terms of levumelwano sesinabo sokusithengisela. And I worry because if bona banebo load shedding isikhathi lesithe kangaka, and yet they are selling it to several of these regional countries, kuyawendekani nasesikhona sesifuna kutendela thine akwethu ngala, or do we need to then still buy somewhere else, which I don't know where is, or do we need to produce on our own, and how do we still go wind, solar, whatever? I can't even know, especially ngoba we need a lot of energy if we want to diversify the economy and grow it.
Yeah, I think what happened is we took a long time to realize that we needed to improve our own power generation capacity as a country. Whilst we knew that the power sharing agreement was subject for review in 2025, and it was not going to be reviewed in our favor because South Africa is experiencing challenges themselves. I think the government kind of ignored that responsibility to quickly develop internal generation capacity. So what needs to happen now is that we need to, unfortunately, these investments have got they need a lot of lead time.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like you just install capacity today and tomorrow you are able to supply. We have a SERA. I think they have issued a number of independent power producers licenses and agreements, but it seems most of the facilities that they have contracted are going to become online in 2026 onwards. So we are likely going to experience a lot of challenges energy-wise come 2025.
Yeah.
If the current government doesn't take action in terms of improving our ability to produce power domestically.
Yeah, you spoke earlier about capacitating the state so that it plays a role in the economy, what others call a developmental state. We are seeing in the economy Abonil and Manvulo, Manqoba, the economic cluster of ministries. Lebe invested in privatizing a lot of these things. If you look at our energy, SEC privatized. They're wanting to privatize medical stores. After massive disasters in procurement, distribution, and everything related to medicine, they want to privatize railway. They are looking to privatize and merge communications, Swazi TV. So there's a lot of privatization drive. Also, the IMF is saying you have bloated too much wage bill, too many people in the civil service. Do you support these structural adjustment changes? And do you see any problems like massive privatization that is coming?
Well, privatization always has pros and cons.
Yeah.
One of the pros is that it can give us improved efficiencies.
Yeah.
In terms of, let's make an example of the public broadcaster.
Yeah.
We have EBIS, we have STVA. You find that each station has got its own engineers, its own HR manager, its own CEO. If you merge them, you achieve efficiencies.
But efficiency, or you're cutting staff and therefore losing jobs.
you achieve efficiencies, which means when you are now hiring someone in the new public broadcaster space, for instance, they have to be multi-skilled people who are going to use the different channels.
Yeah.
The issue there is always when you look at eSwatini, the TV station, for instance, maybe 80% of the money that they use there comes from the subvention.
Yeah. I doubt they're even profitable.
EBIS, you find that 60% comes from the subvention.
Yeah.
What we should be having is increasingly a public broadcaster that is able to generate a lot of their money through adverts and things that they sell to the public, so that they are able to sustain their operations. So the beauty of privatization, it comes with those kind of efficiencies.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it comes with challenges in as far as you will find that it becomes profitable for the public broadcaster, which has been privatized, to quickly source content, which means they will be sourcing content in the Manzini-Mbabane corridor instead of going out there to the rural areas, for instance.
Because I would imagine if it's profitable for them to stick to Manzini-Mbabane, there's no reason to go to state.
There's no reason to go to state.
Ganzi, from a
public broadcaster point of view.
You need to involve the entire country and
Precisely, yeah. So those are the disadvantages of privatization, for instance, because then you have to put the manifest profit before you think about what is the role of the public broadcaster as far as informing the citizen and educating the citizens and entertaining the citizen, keeping them informed. One of the things that happened, for instance, during the civic unrest was that the internet was shut down. And because of some orders that were issued at the time, the radio was unable to tell the citizens what was happening outside. So some people still left Lavomisa coming into town, only to be met with flying bullets. You know. So the role of the public broadcaster is so very, very important to ordinary citizens, especially people at the periphery, because they depend on that information.
But there's a difference between state broadcaster and public broadcaster, right?
Yes, precisely.
And what's that difference?
For
the listener.
The state broadcaster would be more focused on one-way flow of information, informing the citizen what the state is on about. But a public broadcaster is more independent, is trying to make sure that they balance the interest of the state and the interest of the citizen.
Yeah.
So as a public broadcaster, you do not just you do not become a government mouthpiece, making sure that any propaganda is taken out there, but you bring forward balanced content. You allow all people, even dissenting voices,
you don't
access.
Become the government say so type of publication.
Yes, precisely. So you cannot have a public broadcaster where there is an overall ban on certain political formations
or views.
So everyone needs to have access as a right.
Yeah. So, I mean, my concern with this privatization thing is twofold. Is one, the public interest, that we are taking away the public interest in the production of water, electricity, and everything. But also number two is the ownership. Who are buying these state entities? The same people laba collapse lama institutions langa la esive, because uma ngabe wena iagenda yakho SPTC is to ensure ukuthi lonke eliswati line access to communication, liyakhona ukukhulumisana lodwa, bayakhona ukukhuluma labantu bangephandle and all of that. That's your main motivation for existence, and utimejarisha ukuthi emacingo wasangena kanani eMaswatini, and therefore also cheap access to that important communication. Same thing with the water. Your main motivation, how widespread is water penetration. Same thing na gas. But as soon as you make it profit oriented, then if it doesn't make economic sense for us to kufaka line le mandi lihambe le ngimifula for ema homestays like 5, you're not gonna do that because the motivation is profit. So I just wanted to have your opinion. I mean, that's just me. Gule issue privatization. Really, the issues of ownership and the issues of public good versus profit.
Yeah. So I think there are good examples of how you can run a privatization drive.
Okay.
For instance, you are talking about profit. Profit cannot be the only indicator of success for a privatized entity, especially when the subject commodity is a public good, such as water and electricity. So if you are a government and you are thinking of privatizing your water services, as an example, you need to be able to say to EWSC, of course, I'm giving you the independence to run as a private entity to be profitable. Here are the indicators that you still need to show me at the end of the year in terms of profits, but you still need to show me how many new households have you given access to clean water.
But
and then you give them targets on an annual basis to
as
say,
what? When I was a independent company, me and you are shareholders 50-50. Why do we need to listen to government?
The tendency of privatizing essential services such as water is that they become a monopoly.
Yes.
Chances are they become a monopoly. And every monopoly needs to be subject to government regulation.
Oh yeah, okay, okay.
So that is why then when you are able to regulate, you are able to still give them some
Policy direction.
indicators that are going to serve the policy direction.
Yeah, that's true. Because I spoke earlier about issue of health. It's been a disaster.
Yeah.
I think that 3, maybe 4 most important things that ibhekene na hulumende wa Baba Dlamini. At least to me, I just want to check from you in terms of priority. What do you think? But for me, it's really the issue of corruption. It's not priority wise. Okay, we put it in priority. Meaning is the agency of health collapse. The medical stores and the problems that came with it is just indicative of a collapsed health general. I think 2, the issue of the university and education in general. 3, I think is the issue of road infrastructure. If we are in Lemakaya, you are shocked ukuthi netinzawo la kungahambi khona in public transport lana Tulu because good skondiela and all of that, and most of the developments are happening within the Babane Manzini corridors and those linked to royalty and some. And 4, I think, is the issue of corruption. Because the anti-corruption unit has not done anything, and there's been massive corruption and what I consider to be state capture. Do you think I'm mentioning things that really should be a priority to the new government, or you have a different view around what are the urgent priorities for this new government?
Yeah, I think to some extent, yes, I agree. In particular on the health issue. The health issue, the focus, I think, was deliberately shifted to say there was a challenge with the medical stores, there was corruption, when in effect the challenge that we are having is a cash flow challenge. So the government is unable to raise enough revenue to be able to support the expenditure demands of the various departments.
Yeah.
So that is why you will see now there is a huge discussion around how the former Minister Lazy is saying she was not receiving the support from Minister of Finance in terms of making sure that suppliers are paid in good time and all of those issues. So for me, that seems to be the main issue. And that issue is linked to some extent to what I would have called the lot of royally linked vanity projects that were being supported by the government, whether it's the 5-star fish hotel, the interchange in Manzini, which were crowding out the public expenditures in favor of these projects. So for me, that is where we need to start to be able to resolve our expenditure priorities in such a way that we are able to refocus the expenditure priorities towards the needs of the citizens as compared to the needs of the few that control the government.
Yeah. Because
if you are talking about corruption and state capture, that's where it starts. You know, you will hear a lot about the civil servants that have stolen 5 million here and there, but you hardly hear about all these state tenders that are given to these particular companies that are royally linked.
Yeah.
Where, in my view, when we're talking about value for money, you'll find that instead of buying one pencil for 1 lilangeni, they are buying for 10 emalangeni, 20 emalangeni, because someone needs to pocket the difference.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about corruption, I would say we need to talk about state capture more than corruption.
Yeah.
So that we are able to separate the affairs of the state and government and the affairs of the royal family. And then we are able to move on. From
But
there.
it's interesting, Ushongolembe royal family, because at the heart of our problem is the centrality of the royal family in the affairs of the state and the economy. Ngoba njengoba ukhuluma njena, really cash flow problem ultimately. Nguphi ezihulumende lo prioritizako. Timali nje lo tibuka tihamba tiye kuma projects ahulumende letinga benefit bantu, benefit the royal family, a lot of money.
Yeah. So I think that's where that's the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Once we are able to manage that relationship between the government and the royal family, the monarchy, then we are going to be in a position to say to the government, these are the citizen priorities. This is what you need to pursue in the next 5 years. And then when they take that instruction, they go to do exactly that. But if we have a situation where we have a very competent guy in the form of the Prime Minister, but they receive a small slice of the cake to be able to satisfy the needs of the nation, is certainly going to fail.
So let's talk now about the utopia. It's more or less been dystopia right now. In a perfect Swaziland, how do we restructure the economy? How do we ensure there's services to the people? How do we ensure there's accountability and transparency? What's your vision of this new Swaziland? Because I think that's where, in the democratic camp, for example, we've been missing. We are more around what is wrong and less around what should be the correct and what people should be rallying around as the future or rather the alternative.
Well, I think we need to accept that Swatini is a small, fragile economy overall. So we're unlikely going to have all the resources that we need towards this country's development and also service delivery to the citizen at a massive scale. But I think we need to be able to do better in terms of better expenditure prioritization towards where it matters the most. For instance, we are having so few of our young people transitioning from primary school, where there is free primary education, to secondary, and then even much, much fewer towards tertiary education. If we do not resolve that pipeline, it means we are not going to have a massive number of skilled young people who are going to push the economy upwards. So we'll have a lot of people who are unskilled, uneducated, and therefore they cannot play a role in the economy. You know, so that's where the challenge is. So we need to be able to prioritize education and also diversify the skills base, understand what is happening out there, the global trends, and then we're able to open up. How we open up in our case, we cannot expect to build new universities and polytechnic institutions, because as a small country, that will be a heavy burden on ourselves. We need to be able to say, well, we are supporting the TVET colleges in country, the university in country, but a good number of people needs to be sent to study in other countries, so that we are efficient in the way that we use the little money that we have. I think that's where we need to go. Health is the same issue. They are talking about some form of national health insurance.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the route that we need to take. We
Really?
need to improve. Yeah, because you cannot financialize the health, because health is a right.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is to improve the level of service delivery in our public health facilities.
Yeah.
Meaning hire more nurses and doctors, put the relevant equipment, make sure that there is adequate medications and medicines in those facilities, and they can offer a world-class standard service too.
But also, isn't it not a shame that 50 years or so after independence, still no medical university in the country? Where do we get the doctors, basically? Because if you are taking them to South Africa,
the challenge that we are having now is that we have many doctors that have been trained outside the country that are not able to get appointments.
Really?
Yes. That's the challenge that we are having. So we are having an oversupply. Not an oversupply per se, but the government is not absorbing enough of them to be able to make sure that our hospitals are fully staffed.
Jesus.
So those are some of the challenges that we are having.
And for a country that had been battling issues of TB, HIV and AIDS and everything, the health crisis as a whole, every doctor, every nurse is employed somewhere to deal with this. It's quite strange.
Yeah, so that's the challenge that we're having. So again, I mean, I don't think the solution again is to have a world-class medical university in the country. We have those that we have, but we have access to world-class standard
South Africa,
in South Africa. So we should be clear in terms of every year, this is the number that we send, and then we are able to absorb some of them,
That's true.
Instead of putting up a huge infrastructure that is costly, that we will then fail to maintain or keep at that level of standard. Yeah.
But also, I mean, you're just talking about infrastructure as well. Shocked to me that the country doesn't have a world-class football stadium. And then I heard a member of parliament, newly elected member of parliament, Lindani, say we need to have 5. I'm still conflicted. Do we do a world-class football stadium? I think as a country we do deserve. But at the same time, will it not end up being like a vanity project like Boskoupe, Bomavuso, and all of that? How do we maneuver that space?
Yeah, I think the idea should be mainly to encourage sporting across all codes, not just football, but netball, basketball, and others. And secondly, not to look at just centrally one stadium, but rather ensuring that there are a lot of sporting facilities all around the country. And even people are engaged in competitive sports.
So instead of just building one massive world-class stadium, we can do 10 or so at mid-level stadia that are multi-purpose in terms of their use. I think that's a fair one. And then the last one that controversial, I want to hear what you think. In the breach, they've written about the sustainability of the country independently. With a view that maybe the indicators are that given our reliance on South Africa, we do need to merge with the country, even if it's some federation of sorts, like in the UK, Ireland, Scotland type of, or even, especially for countries like Swaziland, Lesotho, at least, who are just almost too much reliant on South Africa. In fact, there are more Swazis in South Africa than there are in Swaziland. if you think of Mpumalanga. If you look at our rand and monetary policy controlled in South Africa, most of our trade, export, South Africa. Are we viable as a state in the long run?
I think Swaziland was never a viable state. From the time when independence was being discussed, it was always clear that this country was not viable as an independent state.
Yeah.
So Swaziland was always going to depend on this big neighbor, South Africa, in terms of a lot of things. But that said, the challenge with that approach is that is not what your big economists would talk about in terms of integration. The NKI economy has the tendency of sucking blood from these smaller states. So what it simply means is, there's no reason why we don't have our own equivalent of sunlight. For instance, for our handy all the detergents that you use in your kitchen, why should you always rely on South Africa? So the question of having ease of access from your big neighbor, it stifles your ability to be able to generate your local economy and develop your own product lines. So what in essence that means is that the new government needs to have that view in mind to be able to say in 2023, 55 years after independence, why should we import a lot of bottled water from the neighboring state?
The matches, toothpicks,
matches, you name it.
Things
so
we can produce
it's all about then having people who are consistently thinking about this question to say, how do we start to develop our own local production capacity and substitute the imports from the NKI economy? Because the more you import goods, you are exporting jobs. So that is the essence. So I think we have not started as a country to think clearly about what the future looks like without reliance on South Africa.
But would you support a referendum that says in or out of South Africa? Or you still want us to build something on our own?
So I don't think this question of a referendum should come first.
Okay.
Yeah. What should come first is how do we become a vibrant economy that can stand on its own in terms of if South Africa can close the borders, how many months can we survive on our own in terms of enough locally generated food, electricity, and all the things that we need on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So this issue around political integration should come last, because we would have resolved the other issues around how can we survive as a standalone independent country. Because if you're talking about these issues of sovereignty, it is important for a Maswati to maintain that sovereignty and the identity of being a Leswati and belonging to an independent state under the monarchy. So it's not something that we can just subject to referendum and then we think because the majority think that is where we want to go, then we go.
But Nkos, you say under the monarchy, it's a lot of controversial one. What's your future orientation around the issue of the monarchy? It's very central to our problems. As an institution, I would like to throw this in a much more nuanced. There are a lot of people who say they don't want the monarchy. And if you scratch the surface and you say you don't want the holder of the office of the monarch at this point, therefore, if bangangwane bangahlala bathi wena lo hlethi isihlaleni sicela ubeke ubuye eceleni kungene seyilindana, would your position still stand that you don't want the monarchy or you don't want the office holder? You know, there are a lot of those nuances that are missed.
I have not met the lot of people that don't want the monarchy.
Okay, I'm willing to listen.
So the many people that I've met, they want the monarchy.
But who?
The lot of people that I've met, they want the monarchy.
But
they want the institution of the monarchy. The challenge seems to be that there was conflation of the monarchy and government.
Okay.
The two were tied together as a concession, because what was happening after independence, we had a small fragile economy with maybe 300,000 people, and then you had political parties. Clearly, the situation was untenable at the time. The same way that you see now with our small spaza shop, political parties who are always on each other's throats on the social media. You see, now imagine a situation where the country was small number of people, but political parties in the mix, and the people were fighting and all of those things. So there was a concession to say, well, let's allow the monarchy to lead the country, take us to the future. I think what needs to happen now is a separation of the two. The people must take back their government and leave the monarchy as it is.
But, you know, the reason why I'm interested in the monarchy, because I've not had a very nuanced debate from most of the progressive around the issue of the monarchy. Because to me, there are three interlinked yet independent things. There's the holder of the office of the monarchy, in this case, King Mswati III. And then there is the institution of the monarchy, which has its tentacles very deep in the fiber of our society, from Tindvuna to Bukopo to Boshifu. Well, that's the institution now. Its principal public face being the holder of the office of the institution of the monarch. And then there's the Tinkundla system of governance, which even though we can remove, for example, we can change the Tinkundla system of governance and still retain the monarchy as an individual and as an institution. Or we can remove the individual and the institution can remain because, as you may know, Gunebaga Mamba, they're a monarchy, part of the bigger institution that is. Gune Vuna, Nashif, Nabam, they are part of the monarchy as a system and as an institution. And the experiences of Mozambique, South Africa, and the region and the continent are that it's not easy to destroy the institution. It's not easy. In fact, the basis of Renamo's power was the very deep tentacles of the institution. But also, just to throw a span of the wheel, there is also the issue of monarchy existing within a republic. Because there are people who say, no, we want a republic, but South Africa is a republic, but it could be monarchies and a variety of other things. So what's the future looks like for the institution?
I think the issue, Lakhaya, is the coming together of the monarchy and the government.
Okay.
The two, they need to be separated.
Yeah.
The monarchy as an institution should exist as an institution of the monarchy, being responsible for national cohesion, nemicimbi yalelive, inkwala, hlanga, and all of those things, because that is what gives us a unique identity as a Maswati.
Yeah.
Number two, the institution of the monarchy is responsible for our indigenous legal system.
Yeah.
Umthetho walakuhlaleni.
Yeah.
How, for instance, you are allocated this piece of land and you know that it is yours. No one will come and it doesn't matter whether you pay for it, but no one can come and start to say, well, we allocated you this piece, but now we are taking it back because they see you have developed the institution of the monarchy ensures that those kind of things are kept in good order. We have proper roads, we have a madlelo. You can't, for instance, build your house over there because you know, from time to time, let's come together and do 1, 2, 3, you know. So that institution needs to continue to be in existence and remain intact.
Yeah.
Because it has its own role. Yeah. What happened in the case yaseswatini ngilokuthi that institution yabe siniketwa emandla ngalaka government, the modern government.
Yeah.
And that is a problem. So if you remove the monarch that is here today and you replace them with another monarch who will still have the same power as the current, then you won't resolve the problem. You see. So we need to resolve that which went wrong in 1973. And then clearly say we are going to elect every 5 years and put in place the modern government. And they are going to run independently of the monarch.
But how about this monarch is refusing? In fact, even the previous one, they've tasted power and to use a makama sopoza indilinga. They're resisting this separation. How then do we do that?
Well, it was. I don't think. I mean, if I was the monarchy or the monarch, I would give away power just like that. No, I wouldn't as well. You know, and it would be irresponsible to do so. You know, because imagine we have a few individuals that really believe that the country must be run via a multi-party system. They, let's say, they are not the majority of the citizens. And then we, as the monarchy, say, well, since you guys want to take it, and then a few days down the line, there's fighting. What is happening in Lesotho? See. So the people need to mature politically to the level where they demand and take self-government.
But it seems to be a contradiction. On the one hand, the monarch must still retain the power.
The people must mature. They must mature.
But when 50 years is not mature.
The people must mature to a point where they demand and take self-government.
Okay.
They must take.
They
must take it. They must not be given. You see, when you're talking about power, if you are given power,
you misuse it. Or what we form.
No, you can't. Literally, you can't. That's why if you're talking about South Africa today, the economy is still in the hands of the
previous owner,
white Afrikaner establishment. Because these people, they were wherever they were invited. And then they sat in Codesa and then they said, guys, what if we give you 1, 2, 3? Because they were angry, they took whatever they were given. But you need to take power. You cannot be given. Once you are given, it will be a hollow thing.
Just last one. I mean, now that we're talking about the issues of taking and giving, we have been talking about a dialogue and how we want to negotiate our way into taking this power, as you call it. I can't imagine, given the numbers, given the power of the monarch and everything, that is the equilibrium set for a transitional dialogue that can really offset power and shift power and all of that? Or skewed, we still need to do more to ensure that it's level, so that whatever negotiations or dialogue that takes place is one where it's between two equals. At least as I appear now, to me at least, it seems that the king has upper hand, and if he were to call dialogue now, if he were to do that, for example, he would massively take or gain more in that dialogue, and the people would have lost.
Yeah, that's why the people need to mature to the point where they take over power.
Yeah.
The people should not be called by someone,
Yeah.
and then they say, let's talk, because that person who calls you will have an upper hand.
Yeah.
Obviously. So for me, I think any dialogue that we will have now is probably to negotiate some small changes. Yeah, minimal changes. That will make us incrementally make progress towards a future where we might have the power restored back to the people. But now
Yeah. No, thank you so much, Nkosi. It's been a massive educational discussion with you. Sibonga nalo ukuthi you were able to balance up the issues of the economy and issues of the politics and governance. We just want to know in last words, just to help us invite our people to the bridge and like our page and all of that. We are trying to grow as an institution, but
yeah, thank you for having us. I think it was a great pleasure for us to be hosted by the bridge, the Swazi bridge. I'd really encourage other eMswati to come and enjoy this platform and people to bring their adverts so that they can advertise in this space. It's good to see eMswati starting something that has a potential to be huge in future.
Thank you so much. Siyabonga kakhulu Nkosi.
Siyabonga.